Welcome, everyone. We're diving into a question that, let's be honest, keeps a lot of parents and educators up at night. What are smartphones really doing to our kids' brains? Today, we're focusing on a super critical window of development, ages 5 to 8, and we're basing our explainer on the findings from Chapter 1 of a major new analysis. So let's start with the big question right out of the gate. What is actually happening inside a 5-year-old's brain when they're glued to a screen? It's not just about what apps they're using, it's about the fundamental wiring of their minds. And what the science is showing us, well, it's raising some pretty serious red flags.
You see, this age group, 5 to 8 years old, it's not just another phase of childhood. Think of it more like a neurological crossroads. The brain is incredibly malleable, incredibly impressionable right now, and the path that gets paved here can literally influence a child's entire life.
Okay, so for our first section, let's get right into the brain's hardware. How can something as simple as a screen physically change or even rewire its most critical pathways?
To really get what's at stake, we've got to talk about neural pathways. The best way to think of these is as the brain's highway system. And during early childhood, these highways for everything, thought, emotion, learning, they're being built at a mind-boggling speed. Now here's where it gets really specific. When there's too much screen time, the visual part of the brain gets totally flooded with intense stimuli. This actually causes the brain to pull resources from other areas, like the auditory centers needed for language skills. On top of that, it just plain replaces the face-to-face time that's so crucial for learning to read social cues and, develop actual empathy.
So, is there a safe limit? Well, the American Academy of Pediatrics is incredibly clear on this. For kids ages 5 to 8, the recommendation is less than 1 hour per day. And that number isn't just pulled out of thin air. It's specifically designed to protect that delicate highway construction we were just talking about.
All right, so that's the impact on the brain's physical structure, the hardware. Now, let's talk about the software. What's the emotional and cognitive fallout? What are the changes we can actually see in how these kids think and behave? A really groundbreaking study from Sapient Labs found some pretty troubling patterns. Kids with heavy screen exposure, they showed poorer emotional regulation. Having a much harder time managing frustration. They also had more difficulty coping with disappointment. And maybe most concerning, a kind of detachment from reality, with a lot less interest in the imaginative play that is so vital for development. And that same research, it uncovered another really key finding. It looks like girls in this age group are more vulnerable to these emotional effects. They actually showed higher rates of both social anxiety and what's called emotional dysregulation compared to boys who had similar levels of screen time. And this right here, this comparison just perfectly illustrates the core trade-off. It's almost a zero-sum game. Every single hour spent on passive screen use is an hour that's not spent on interactive play. And that's time lost for building executive function, developing social skills, and fostering creativity. These are the absolute cornerstones of a healthy mind.
But this isn't a one-size-fits-all problem. It turns out the risks and also the protective factors can change dramatically depending on where a child is growing up.
If you just look at this table, you can see 3 totally different stories unfolding. In urban areas, kids tend to have the highest screen time and face a real risk of sensory overload. Out in the suburbs, the big risk is often the screen as a babysitter. And then in rural areas, screen time might be the lowest, but it can sometimes be a tool used to fight social isolation. Every environment really does have its own unique set of challenges. So, what does this all add up to? Why are we hammering home this 5 to 8-year-old window so much? Because the habits and the pathways formed here, they don't just go away. They create what you might call a lifelong echo. This quote from the source material just hits the nail on the head. A young brain's ability to change and adapt, its plasticity, is an incredible strength. But that exact same flexibility is what makes it so incredibly vulnerable to being shaped by its environment, for better or for worse. So in the end, this isn't really about 1 hour of screen time on a Tuesday. It's about the deep patterns of attention, emotional control, and social connection that are being set for a lifetime. The choices we're making about technology right now are going to echo through decades of a child's life. Which really just leaves us with one final crucial question. What kind of echo are we choosing to create?